Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, good early evening. My name is Hal Roth, and I direct the Contemplative Studies program here at Brown. And I'm really happy to welcome you. This is, I guess, the first event of our lecture and workshop series for this semester. And I wanted to be sure to let you all know that tomorrow from 11 to 6 in Hillel's Winnick Chapel, Abbot Kawakami will be leading an Intro to Zen Practice workshop. Admission is free. Just come over a little bit before 11, and you're certainly welcome, and want to encourage you to come. For how many people, show of hands, this is your first Contemplative Studies event? Oh, good. That gives me the opportunity to say a few words about Contemplative Studies. Otherwise, I wouldn't. But anyway, so we're one of the newest concentrations in programs at Brown, and what we do is we focus on the study of human contemplative experiences of focused attention and insight that have been developed in many different cultures. So we study them in their historical context. We also study the burgeoning amount of scientific literature on contemplative studies. And the third important part is that we also study how to do contemplative practice in a classroom setting. And one of the key differences that enables us to do that here is that we don't. So normally, if you go and do contemplative practices at a monastery, a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, and so on, you not only learn the practice, you learn the cognitive framework in which that practice is embedded. But it's kind of expected, or you're explicitly asked to believe in the truth of that framework. And that's something we can't do here in a modern secular university. So we teach you the practice, we teach you the framework, but then it's up to you. You know, you test out yourself in the kind of laboratory of your own body and mind. And so it's really completely up to you. So this kind of enables us to do contemplative practice teaching in the context of a classroom where that might not be appropriate in many other circumstances. So we study human contemplative experience. We study the scientific research on it, but we also look at it from its cultural context, humanistic context, and also artistic expressions. We've developed our own distinctive series of courses. We probably have 6 or 7 courses a year, and then we make use of existing courses. So if any of you is interested in a concentration, please go to our website. We've got a very informative website. And there's also videos of a lot of our lectures from the past, really more than a decade. There are a number of scientific labs that work with contemplative studies that are part of our group.
Okay, is this room? Yeah.
One of them is the Kathy Kerr Lab for Embodied Neuroscience. You can also find that from our website. There's also the Britain Lab. And there's also the new Center for Mindfulness that has been developed out of public health that Professor Lux has developed. So if you have any more questions about the concentration and would like to learn more about it, please go to our website. So this is the first event. We had a very active year last year, so we're not going to be quite as active this year. But the next event, in addition to tomorrow's workshop, then in March 9th and 10th, we will have an Intro to Tibetan Buddhist Practice workshop led by Professor Jose Cabazon from University of California in Santa Barbara. And that's on the 9th, Sunday the 9th. I think it's the 9th and 10th, or the 10th and 11th, whatever is the Sunday and Monday. We also have Professor Douglas Christie from Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles will be talking on Christian contemplative practice, and that's on April 9th, I believe. And those are the main. On April 22nd. Oh, right, and we're going to have another workshop on Zen practice on Sunday, April 22nd, led by Abbot Masaki Matsubara. So if you want to learn more, just go to our website and you'll have a list of our events and so on there. So I want to say a few words of introduction to our speaker tonight, Taka Osho. So it's been kind of fun today to kind of touch base with Taka again. Back long, 36 years ago, when I was a postdoctoral scholar at Tohoku University in Sendai, I got a chance to do a year's worth of intensive Zen practice a week at the very same monastery where Taka himself trained many years later. He's several generations younger. We were actually introduced by an old friend of mine he was in grad school when I was an undergrad, who became a very famous Japanese art historian, and who now, anybody ever been to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art? Nobody in the room? Yes. And then there's the Japanese pavilion there. Rob Singer set it up. So it was through Rob Singer that I ended up meeting Taka. Now it's going to be, I guess, 3 years ago, coming up this spring.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but today we're kind of geeking out about, practicing in the monastery. I mean, the monastic practice is very difficult and challenging. You get up really early, you do a lot of meditation. There's very strict discipline. There's no talking throughout the week. It's a kind of a unique, challenging atmosphere all its own. But those of us who've been through it, it's kind of like you kind of have a bond. That we've kind of done it, we've kind of seen the strengths and weaknesses of it, and we kind of survived. And so it was a lot of fun to kind of geek out over intensive, waking up at 3:30 in the morning and going to sleep at 11 and being yelled at in the meditation. I mean, somehow it sounds a little perverse, but it's kind of bonding experience. But one of the really interesting things that Taka is doing, and so in Japan, the Rinzai Zen is fairly conservative, and it's kind of stuck in many ways in a lot of the values and attitudes of 17th, 18th century. And there's a lot to be said for that, but on the other hand, there's a lot to be said for innovation and bringing age-old spiritual traditions, bringing them up to date into the 21st century. And one of the really important things that Taka is doing at his temple, he's in a temple, one of 50 temples within the grounds of this
46, yeah.
This kind of vast monastery, monastic complex in the middle of, just north of the center of Kyoto, called Miyoshinji. It has walls around it. Imagine this giant college campus with a bunch of small colleges, and that's kind of the model that it's not misleading to think of it that way. So Taka is the vice abbot of the Shunkuin Temple, and he has a guest house there. Many of you traveling to Japan, look him up online, and you'll find it's a wonderful place to stay. But Taka is doing something really interesting. He's trying to bring, in many ways, Rinzai Zen into the 21st century, kind of modernize it. He's done a lot of work with the mindfulness, Western mindfulness traditions that have been brought into Japan more recently through the scientific research and innovation of John Kabat-Zinn. He's also very, very progressive in that he supports LGBTQ people, and he is maybe the only Rinzai cleric to do marriage ceremonies. He's in many ways trying to innovate, I think, in many important ways. So it's an honor to have Taka with us today. And this is his first time on the East Coast. He bought himself a really heavy parka. I think he thought he was going to Alaska. Please join me in giving Taka a warm welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Well, he joked about my jacket because I freaked out about that's a bomb cyclone you guys had 3 weeks ago. I just freaked out because oh my God, it's gonna be minus 20 degrees and I'm gonna be I'm gonna freeze to die or something like that way. So that's why I bought some expedition kind of a jacket in a way. So then I'm here, but it's kind of tomorrow gonna be warm and the day after tomorrow really warm. So I just how I deal with my sweat. So that's what my thought right now. But so yeah, how kind of mention you almost talked about my introduction part, so that's great. But So yeah, no need to apologize. But so as he mentioned, I live in this one of the temples in like one of the sub temples in a huge temple complex. But also that one is the headquarters of Myoshinji School. In a way, they're the one of the largest. Actually, they're the largest Rinzai schools in Japan. Then, so in a way that kind of experience I have in the headquarters of this, well, Myoshin School, by the way, started in the 14th century. Then, in a way, those traditions passed down to the generation, to the next generation, to the next generation, still continue today. Then, in a way but still, we actually, but each generation faces different issues. But right now, many Japanese temples suffering tremendously because of this, first of all, social structure change, or basically every traditions in Japan, not just about the Buddhist tradition, but Shinto tradition, which is an indigenous religion in Japan. Also tea schools, tea ceremony schools, flower arrangement, also kimono, all the traditions suffering in a way because first of all, family structure changed. So Japan was a kind of old-fashioned, like an Asian tradition in a way. Grandparents and the parents and the kids live together. That's the old-fashioned way. Then that case really easy to see that easy for us to pass down the traditions because. Like in my case, I lived with my grandmother. Then, so in a way that I just, she took me, she took me in the backyard because we have a cemetery because it's a temple, which is a kind of unusual setting for, it's not like every Japanese family have their family tombs in backyard, but we just, go there almost every day, do the prayer in front of our own ancestral tombs. But also take me to the prayer hall, give a flowers, give an incense offering, something like that. They even like just regular Japanese house, they have this family altar if you go to the old house. Then, so in a way, since we are children, we seeing what's our grandparents doing. So without any instruction, logical explanation, tradition just passed down to the next generation. So this is a smooth transition in a way. But so many people move into the urban area of Japan, right? So then they don't live in those ancestral home anymore, or those hometown anymore. So that's why. So in a way, the just core family in a way, parents and kids. So they never seen what grandparents did, in the from the previous generation. So, so that's why right now, if I need to teach traditions to, for instance, I often teach classes at the high schools and universities in Japan. Also, sometimes corporation invite me to talk about traditions, but I need to explain things logically. Kind of step-by-step approach, right? But basically, that is a really important approach in a way in these days because people don't know. People don't really see the traditions anymore. They didn't grow up in a traditional, tradition. They haven't seen a tradition when they grown up. So that's why we need to, approach it logically. Why we do this? What's the reason here? All kind of thing. Then, but this kind of thing, for instance, and one thing I recognize that one is, in a way, reason why I started working on the mindfulness. One reason why is actually mindfulness of a logical approach, right? Then that approach helping me to actually teach about Buddhism or Zen traditions or traditions in Japan as well. But at the same time, this logical and also linear approach step-by-step approach, they have some issues. I found out. So then that's actually a reason why I wanted to bring more Zen tradition, especially in your program, in a way. So it's not linear. It's not logical. Just logical approach and logical analytical approach. So that kind of thing actually help us to actually embody this type of practice. Then, but mindfulness, for instance, if you think about right now, so mindfulness right now based on which tradition? Anyone? Anyone practice mindfulness here? Think about which tradition they're based on. Vipassana, right?
Insight tradition?
Not Rinzai, unfortunately. Insight. So it's a Vipassana, right? In Vipassana case, then so it's quite step-by-step approach. It's a linear approach in a way. Then if you can think about difference between the Western philosophy and the Eastern philosophy, they have a major different, and they have different approaches. Because Western philosophy tend to have analytical, logical, linear thinking, right? But Eastern approach, especially the Asian philosophy, based on holistic, also dialectic approach. Then why Theravada Buddhism become mostly based of mindfulness practice? I mean, of course, John Kabat-Zinn, also Richie Davidson, they practice insight meditation, the Vipassana tradition first, or including Dan Goleman too. But that's a logical, linear approach. So that's easier for the Western culture to adapt that kind of tradition. Then, good example, for instance, also kind of linear thing. Karate, they change more linear approach. Because Japan's case, they didn't have any those colorful belts originally. They only had a black and white. You're a master, you're not. That's it, right? But when they moved to West, they started having this linear approach. But this part here really kind of there's the issue about if you look at karate, you can see the issue there because, for instance, if you practice karate association in Japan, long time they refused to join the Olympics game. Anyone can guess a reason? What's happened to professional athlete or Olympics athlete?
Because of competition?
Competition, but that's good. That's still, even traditional part, we have a competition. But that's one thing, yeah. But recently, some people practicing meditation start using those biohacking things, pills and food. But, yeah. Commercial marketing, that's part. But for instance, any professional athlete, Olympic athlete, the end of their career, what's the end of career? They retired, right? They retired from their practice. But there's no such a thing in retirement in original karate or any of those martial arts actually. Because the reason why was because martial arts itself is not the goal. Right? It's just a method to learn about life. So that's the total embodiment, right? But in a way, the step-by-step approach. So that's actually one negative. I can say that's one of the negative side of the step-by-step approach. Or this westernized version of karate, or even you can see kind of mindfulness part a little bit. In a way. So then Theravada tradition, I'm not criticizing Theravada tradition, but Theravada tradition had a kind of easier entrance for the Western society because they had a kind of linear approach, right? So first they have a samatha, so calming, and also developing concentration. Then next step, you develop concentration. Then you move to insight meditation, really step-by-step approach. Right? then they clearly using that one right now. I mean, even but from the beginning. I think even like if you're looking at old like sutra, like text like a Satipatthana, it's really kind of there's this clear like step-by-step instruction. Then that's why actually Theravada tradition attracted many psychologists. Then, but in a way that in the mindfulness practice, I can see the issue there that people actually just focus on this technique part. Insight then done, right? Then also I can see the Western Zen tradition too. For instance, if you kind of look at the two, I mean, for instance, Zen tradition just focus on Japanese Zen tradition. I'm not really expert about Korean or Chinese Zen tradition, so I don't talk about that one. But for instance, two major traditions in Japanese Zen. For instance, who practices Zen tradition here? Which one you practice? Korean, okay. Anyone practicing Japanese Zen tradition except Hal? And Jason? Oh, you Chinese stuff. Well, Hal and me have we practice same tradition because we basically coming from same Rinzai tradition, right? But anyone practice Soto tradition? Soto tradition. Then, for instance, if you actually look for the Zen centers in the United States, probably you find more Soto traditions. But also, not only in the United States, but Europe, same way. You probably find more Soto tradition there. One reason why was actually they overissued the Zen Master title too. How was called it popcorn roshi. It's like it came out like a popcorn like in the 60s and 70s. But also, the reason why they were accepted in the West more than Rinzai was they have strict rules. More like, for instance, how you lay down when you sleep. Which side, you kind of lay down. You don't sleep on the back. Actually, I think you lay down on the left side. Well, no, sorry, right side. Right side, yeah. Then also, it's, you have this almost detailed instruction of how you eat and how you sit down, all kind of thing. But Rinzai's case almost like freestyle, almost. There's more kind of freedoms. But why, and people choose freestyle, right? But why this one didn't work out? I mean, like for instance, people actually chose Soto more. Why? What do you think?
The structure gives a kind of safety.
Safety, yeah, that's right. That's a major thing because they know that, for instance, Rinzai tradition is kind of hard that, they like, okay, I'm in Rinzai, but okay, so what are I supposed to do, right? So people get nervous. I think I'm studying Rinzai kind of way, always kind of question mark. But Soto's, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because of the Western versus Eastern philosophy. The Yamo rule is more linear. That's why it became more popular rather than Rinzai.
Exactly. But also, yeah, they actually, they can confirm themselves that they actually practicing Soto because I'm following these rules. I'm doing this one this way or that way. So they can identify themselves. I'm Soto practitioners easily. I mean, the rules in a way, for instance, if you think about, even as a traditions, rules, for instance, dietary restrictions. Many religion have different religion have dietary restrictions, right? They actually, first of all, they can isolate from other groups. Because in a way, if you're eating food and then say, oh, I can eat pork, and it's hard to invite, for instance, if somebody has a dietary restriction, for instance, you have friends, all kind of friends, then, if somebody has a dietary restriction, it's really hard to choose a restaurant, right? Or when you invite somebody, people from different, faith, it's really hard to choose what you're going to make. Then in a way that in the past, it's worked to isolate their own group from the others, right? Because eating food actually creates tremendous bonding experience if you're eating together. But I have this dietary restriction, but they don't have it. But we want to actually we have this restriction, so that's why you can only hang out with people in the same faith. Something like that too. Then also but other part there is when you actually go out, with somebody else, then if you have a dietary restriction, you can identify yourself easily, your faith. I mean, for instance, other people eating pork, but I cannot eat it. Or other people eating meat, I cannot eat it. By the way, I'm not vegetarian or anything, but so that's I will talk about that one later. But something like that, so you can identify yourself easily. But also, this is also things, if you kind of compare Buddhist tradition and the Abrahamic religion, what's the major difference, teaching-wise?
God.
God? Okay. So for instance, God there, but how about Buddhism? I mean, Abrahamic God, yeah, they all are different names, but they have a concept, notion of Almighty, right? How about Buddhism? In the beginning, okay, I should say that more specifically, beginning of Buddhism.
No self.
No self, but there's no notion of Almighty, right? So then one of all these Buddhist texts even mention that Buddha say that I'm also kind of a religious studies scholar, so okay, hypothetically, if we say if the historical Buddha actually existed, in the text, he's I think that's a Pali canon. He mentioned that don't make his statue, don't worship me, because he's human. So that's why in the early Buddhist tradition, they had a handprint of Buddha or a footprint of Buddha. They didn't make a statue. Statue things came out, because of the Hindu influence or Central Asian tradition actually changed Buddhism completely. But also because of they didn't have this notion of Almighty, so that's why easy to localize, right? But go back to the point is, so in the beginning, there's actually, for instance, Buddhism and also Abrahamic religion, how they consider about teachings are tremendously different. So for instance, the Abrahamic religion, the teachings are, anyone? So you see all the rules there, right? They're commandment, right? Commandment. So in a way, you have to follow this, because I'm perfect being. I made a rule. If you follow this one, you go to heaven. Whatever people talk about that one, right? Depending on the tradition, well, mostly heaven, but for instance, Buddhist tradition, if you actually see the old texts, what's their tone of voice? What kind of tone of voice they have in the old Buddhist text?
Much more compassionate.
More compassionate, yeah, that's true.
It's more like a dialogue.
Dialogue, right? But also, anyone? I saw the hand move here, but probably I'm hallucinating.
Well, I don't know if I'm imposing. I might be imposing all sorts of Western stuff on this, but there's an empirical approach. Try it for yourself. If it's not useful, don't use it.
That's true. That's the important part, because Buddhist teaching is suggestions.
Suggestions, not commandments.
Not commandment. Yeah, it's basically a suggestion. It's not commandment. Even you can see certain section of a Buddhist text saying that I reached this enlightenment this way. Then you can try it, but may not work. So you think. They give you a space to think. I mean, that's why in the Buddhism case, critical thinking is a really important part. Actually, they give you a space to own thinking. But Abrahamic religion's case, traditionally it's more like don't doubt my words. You believe it because you do it because I said so. Type of approach. right? But Buddhism case, so they had this notion of more like suggestion. So that's why then if you think about that, so if you actually grown up in a Abrahamic religious tradition, if they have a rule, it's easy to adapt the tradition rather than just do it, this might work. But this one here actually, recently my friend conducted studies in Japan. It's actually a news show. He used a news show about, so what he did was he actually did 2 commentators. Then he instructed one of commentators always have to use the word absolutely or definitely. So definitely this way, that way. Then my friend instructed the other commentator saying always say maybe or possibly. Then actually this is the human tendency. So which audience, which commentator they believe most?
The dogmatic one.
Dogmatic one, right? So dogmatic one, we have a human tendency that we tend to believe is dogmatic one. So somebody said this is definitely this way, that way, even like, logic is all wrong or, even like wrong information, we tend to believe that.
I mean, like fake news.
Fake news. Fake news, so yeah, in a way. Or Trump. I say that. but that's actually, human tendency because, if somebody, have a dogmatic approach, you don't need to think. But if somebody is saying that the possibility or, in a way, kind of like, oh, maybe this way or possibly this way, you need to think. You have to use your brain again. So that's why we tend to actually kind of rely on this dogmatic approach. I mean, we tend to take the dogmatic, comment as a, fact, So, so there's actually issue there. I mean, but because of this, sort of approach, really kind of this is the rule. This is you follow this way. So that's why in a way that people feel more comfortable. Actually, feel more comfortable, but also easier for them to identify. But Rinzai tradition, on the other hand, it's really, I said, more a freestyle. It give you lots of space to think. But also, this linear approach, the issue there is, or actually linear approach, issue there is, I said, retirement part. It's kind of lacking the embodiment. In a way, so for instance, you do this one first, then if you're done, you go to next step. Then if you do this one, you go up to the next step kind of way. But eventually, people actually get comfortable in certain level. Then they give up. Sometimes they give up their practice, or actually they feel like, oh, I step up this level until this level, so I'm better than other people. Something kind of approach they start having. Then especially today's case, if you think about this, I can't really contemplative. So I have issue. I'm even studying this one. I have issue about pronunciation part, but contemplative study. Okay, so then in a way, I had some discussion with researchers in these days, and then my issue was people really focusing on, well, more like they have tended really heavy on the analytical approach, but also this step-by-step approach. Then so that's why they actually focus on the small part of this practice, not really kind of talking about embodiment. Then I kind of I told one researcher, I borrowed a word from David Marr. He was he was psychologist. He passed away when he was 35, but he actually criticized some of the researcher too. But once he said if you want to understand how birds fly, you need to see, you need to have different approaches. You cannot just look in at feather to understand how birds fly, right? But right now, it's this field here. Really, people just focus on like small things, just breathing. How breathing influence our mental conditions, or postures, or different technique, how that they influence our stress level, something like that way. But in a way, the embodiment part, of course, I'm not saying that analytical, logical, linear approach is wrong. We need to have those. I'm going to talk about reason why later, but for instance, how and I experience monastic life. So especially how probably had a difficulty in the language part too, but because the region he went, they have a really thick regional accent. And then I went to the same monastery, but I came from different regions, so I actually had a hard time to understand sometimes, some of my senior practitioners. But for instance, in monastery, first day if you join there, unlike this type of class, they don't give you any instruction. First they have some like an entrance ritual thing, like 3 days. You kind of bow like this one in the entrance for 3 days. And the first 2 days, like we do like this. So there's a huge, like a big step in the entrance. We kind of bow like this on all the 3 days. You cannot move much. And the purposely, actually, some of the priests come after lunchtime. They throw us away. So they say, we don't need you. You're not worthy. So just go away. So they give us time to walk around. Remove our back pain or something like that. Then we come back and then do that ritual again. 3 days. Then next 2 days, that's on 2 days. And the next 3 days, we actually sent to some isolated room, and then just meditate for 3 days. Then after the ritual done, entrance ritual done, they actually, finally they send us to the meditation hall. But when you go there, there's no instruction. So we don't know what to do. But what's happening is if you do something wrong, they just yell at you. They just yell at you. But they just don't give us any reason. Then try a different way, and they still yell at you. For instance, in my case, so first day I went there, I had some wrong entrance way of entering the room, so they yell at me. I have no idea because they don't tell me what to do. Then I try to sit down in my own seated place, and then I probably did something wrong, and then they yell at me. But they don't tell me any reason, right? And of course, then constantly people yelling at me, I get nervous, right? But think about what I need to do. And I check other people, then I try to figure out what's going on around there. Then I try a different approach, but they still yell at you. And that kind of continued like the first 2 months. Probably I was not a good student. That's why too. But but 2 months, people keep yelling at you, but they don't tell the reason, right? Instead of the step-by-step approach, it's like, oh, you're a new one, so when you walk in, you need to do this one. Then before you sit down in your own meditation place, you need to do this one. But you can see the difference, right? In this case, you think about how your attention works. How your attention works. Or what do you pay attention to? So linear approach versus this type of, this you do wrong, just people tell you, fix it. How your attention works in this case? pay attention to? This is really important. I kind of really try to emphasize this part, and I think this is a really important part of one reason why we need to kind of bring out the Zen tradition to 21st century, especially this field. They help us to do the embodiment. What do you think? What's actually the how you pay attention differently?
Well, one focuses on what you did wrong, and the other one is kind of showing you what to do, right?
Yeah.
Is it like the logical approach, maybe you're focusing on the future because you're thinking ahead, so your attention isn't in the present moment, whereas if you never know what you're doing right,
Mm-hmm.
if they yell at you, I mean, there you are, you're staying off guard.
Okay, that's one. Yeah, that's a 1 point, 2 points. But how pay attention to everything, right? Because step-by-step approach, you just like that what I need to do. So I need to be careful about this one. Then next, you do it wrong, but people tells you do this one next time. Then you pay attention to that one, right? But this almost like I say, yeah.
But they say that everything is the meditation. Everything you do is the meditation. Eating, sleeping, walking.
Yeah, but this case is more about attention part.
So if I pay attention to, I look to see if somebody else is doing it right, and he's not getting yelled at, I would do it the way he's doing it, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Something like that. So you pay attention to everything, right? You pay attention to everything, your surroundings, and also what other people do, then also yourself. So your attention not just one specific thing. It's like because linear approach gives you, okay, I need to be careful about this one right now, but next one they tell you what to do next, and then I need to pay attention to this. I need to pay attention to this, but not really the, in this way you can learn about what other people's beings are. Right, being part. It's not about techniques or manners only, but because this type of tradition, in a way, especially Buddhist tradition, actually one of the goal there is changing your beings, right? But as a human being, it's not just about how to take your shoes or how you eat, right? It's more about how this person lives. Then that's actually, you can see that in monastery, because I don't say my teacher was really superb example, that, but he's being there in a way, teach you kind of, I need to observe how this person lived. I think I was reading Richie Davidson's book, and then he actually brought the example of Jewish rabbi's story. I think Rabbi Bear or something, I forgot his name, but his disciple actually, started living with him, and then some other lady asked him, "What do you learn from him? What do you want to learn from him?" And he said, "First, I want to see how he tied his shoes." Right. So, in a way, I think that's good. That's a great explanation about learning about the embodiment. It's not just about, this is a ritual you should learn. This is a meditation you should learn. But that's case you can learn how people live. I mean, karate part there. Go back to karate part too, because karate part in a way, linear approach in a way, or concept of retirement there. They just focus on the martial arts part, or how to kick, how to throw the punch, or how to protect yourself. But in a way that back then the idea was actually you live with master and learn how he lives. Then you can actually also learn about karate. Then at my temple, in my temple, actually, there's a really, well, there's actually the painting done by Kano artist. There's actually a room. The theme there is the 4 pastimes of Chinese Confucianist scholars. So there's actually entire room surrounded by one room surrounded by screen paintings. Each side showing a different hobbies of Chinese Confucianist scholars. Then one side actually they playing board game, Go, Japanese kind of with checkers kind of thing, but more complicated. I don't know how to play. And the second side is they play music, like a string instrument. And then third side they're reading poetries. And then fourth side they actually enjoying the paintings. And that was a really popular theme between, I should say, especially between the 17th century and mid-19th century. Then actually the theme was often used in the castle. I mean, for instance, Edo Castle, we don't have it anymore, now the Imperial Palace, but Edo castles, well, that was Shogun's castle. Then his son, so Shogun's son's room, actually, they had that same theme with instead of grown up, but children. But also other castles had such kind of room, especially for their vassals or high-ranking officers. Because back then, especially between the 17th century, mid-19th century, Confucianism was a really important subject for the warrior class. It's like a government. They use for the government exam actually. So that's why, in a way, that they're forced to study, encouraged to study Confucianism. But that room's theme of room, what theme of painting like that one, they're not really encouraging study the Confucianism. They're just showing their hobbies. You see this message there? Because in a way that they actually kind of in a way, they're encouraging people to study the Confucian, but don't just study a textbook. You should live like them. You practice their hobbies. It's not directly connected to the Confucianism. Paintings, music, playing board game, and what else I miss? The poetry, right? It's not really directly connected to the Confucianism, but that's their hobbies, considered as their main hobbies. So you practice their hobbies as well. So you live like them. So you start thinking like them. So that's kind of approach you can see that there. I mean, so it's kind of embodiment. Then that painting become really, in a way, always when I talk about this type of thing, that kind of thing become really kind of a major part of my talk because every summer I teach MIT's internship programs in Japan. I teach culture part. Then every year, couple of students, so they actually go to Japan, they do the internship in some like Japanese national research centers or some like a research center major companies. Then always some few students they actually telling me the Japanese company institute they don't teach us anything. I'm so frustrated because I came to Japan, I want to learn something, but they don't teach me anything. They always a couple of students telling me that giving such kind of comment. Then I told them that they don't give you this step-by-step approach. It is about you need to see that how people actually working. So you need to observe. Same as like a monastery in a way. They don't yell at you, but in a way they actually kind of like a. They say that the student told me that okay, for me, for them actually, they feel like they're invisible because they don't interact with them. But because you need to observe, other people doing the research, or working there. You need to really observe them, how they actually live there. So that's a really important part. Then I think that's kind of thing we actually need to bring Zen tradition, especially those monastic kind of approach, to the practice too. Because we need to actually understand that, it's not just about those understand things logically, intellectually. It's not like that. You need to have an embodiment of this type of practice, especially, right? But I mean, for instance, how the meets in the same organization, the one part we know, one pillar. There are 3 pillars. One is actually research, and then second part is philosophy, or intellectual understanding. The third part there is practice. But sometimes scholars skip this practice part. Then they're just talking about effective meditation or something like that. But this embodiment part is quite important. But also, if you think about Zen's case, in some level can be kind of logical too, because meditation itself is kind of the preparation to deal with the koan, the Zen question, especially in Rinzai tradition's case. So in a way, meditation is more like a samatha part, so calming down, developing concentration. Then, the second part, more like an actual jhana part. That's become original word Zen, but. So in a way, we need to have an insight, approach. But insight approach, there kind of not like we kind of paying attention to ourselves, how you perceive, But perceiving part, actually, the question there is actually the koan practice or Zen riddle part. In a way, try to remove your stereotypes or try to remove our fixated image about reality. Then, so Zen's case, this Zen riddle part, you actually live in a monastery, so you learn this one's, with embodiment, but also then you start questioning yourself. How I'm looking at reality. What kind of perspective I'm using, perspective I have. But, as a human, we tend to actually develop certain concrete image about reality or concrete image about ourselves. But we need to keep questioning. So that's actually koan practice. Then that part there, in a way, make us kind of uncertain, right? But uncertainty is a reality. I mean, for instance, we actually, for instance, in these days, we use reality as certain thing, right? But if someone philosophy major here, probably you say no, it's not the right way, because, for instance, if you say reality, what's real, right? But anyone check the word origin of real? Have you checked that meaning? Actually, word origin of real. And the word real, coming from Latin word res, R-E-S. Oh wait, R-A-S. Sorry, res. No, wait, R-A-S, yeah, ras. Then, actually, if you see the meaning there, is things or matter which have uncertain origin. So the word origin of reality, real, was actually some, in a way that something or matters have an uncertain origin. So in a way, we always think you use the word reality. Oh, that's a reality. That's a real. That's a concrete thing. But actually, originally, that is not. That's actually not certain thing, right? Then that's case actually we actually really questioning about how actually looking at reality. That's an idea. Then, but this type of thing in a way that, for instance, if you think about those behavior, you see there's a learning process in the monastery too. I mean, well, you think is you're right, and then they yell at you, right? Then you try again. Then they yell at you. Fix it. they actually keep doing it. Even like I spent like a whole year, but even like the last day they yell at me, you know, you're doing something wrong. And then also, how long you practice with Roshi, the Joshi Roshi?
Over 40 years.
40 years. But did he say, "Oh, you're right," ever?
He passed me in koans, but he never used the term tadasi or anything.
Right. So master keep actually questioning your approach to the reality. But that's kind of habit in a way you actually develop, you know, living, you know, in the kind of environment. So actually that's why, you know, in a way, what I want to really emphasize is this type of thing, really embodiment is really important. Because intellectual understanding, yes, you know, that's important because, for instance, is, you know, Rinzai approach in a way, or monastic approach, weakness there is, bless you, the mistake tend to become tradition sometimes. Somebody make a mistake, and then they start yelling at the other kid, at a new like a greenhorn, say, "Oh, you're wrong, fix it." But these mistakes, you know, in a way, pass down to the next generation as well. But also sometimes, you know, that's another reason why I try to incorporate, you know, a Western approach to analytical, logical, linear thinking, because there's no analysis. So that's why sometimes the adjustment to the change in the society is extremely slow. Because in a way, you know, those senior members keep telling you, okay, fix it, but doesn't tell you the reason. And sometimes actually those, you know, they tend to hold on to the predecessor's approach all the time. So that's why it's actually in a way that sometimes there's a gap between what's happening in the outside the monastery and, you know, in the monastery. So in a way that basically happened in Japanese Buddhism. Their tradition left out from the, you know, modern world. So that's why they lost members, or they lost, you know, number of, you know, temples, because, you know, there's no member. Of course, there's no financial resource for the temple. And then probably some people might know that, but. Guess how many temples in Japan? How many Buddhist temples in Japan? Anyone? Rough number?
1,500.
1,500? 60,000? Anyone? So Jason the closer, actually 70,000.
Oh, that was good.
Actually, more specific number, 75,000.
Zen temples or just?
This is the old temple, Buddhist temple in Japan.
And how big is Japan compared to the United States? How big is Japan in area compared to the United States?
It's the size of California.
California, but population-wise, right now is about 100 million people, 110 millions. Maybe it's kind of declining anyway. We have a low birth rate. We don't have even like a one child anymore, like a 0.7 or something like that. Our birth rate, by the way. But so 100,000 people, no, 100 million people, then 75,000 temples, right? Then how about number of convenience stores? How about number of convenience stores?
250,000.
A million. 7-Eleven.
Half a million.
10 million.
No, actually, number of convenience stores in Japan is about 50 to 60,000. So the temple have more temples than convenience stores. But that's one, but, you know, so I didn't include, for instance, Shinto shrines, right? So that's actually the other major religions in Japan. But by the way, you know, people overlap, you know. For instance, if I use CIA fact book number, 78% of Japanese people are Buddhist, and 84% of Japanese people are Shinto believers. So the total exceeds 100% because there's overlap, right? And then there's a book called Practically Religious. There's a book like that. So you can see that Japanese people choose a religion for the specific reasons. Different religions, specific regional occasions. Well, classic part is people get married in the Christian style or Shinto style, and do the funeral in Buddhist style. Then every New Year they go to Shinto shrine, so something like that. But so if you think about Japanese temple right now they have a 75,000 temples, but convenience stores are between 50,000 to 60,000, right? But if you think of it, how many people actually went to, for instance, I'm here in Japan, I'm in the United States right now, but yesterday, how many Japanese people went to convenience stores? How many percentage of people went to convenience stores?
100.
Probably almost 100%. Well, I should say probably above 90% people went to a convenience store yesterday in Japan. But same question, how many people went to Buddhist temple yesterday in Japan?
Only for funerals.
Yeah, or only funeral, or maybe for the sightseeing reasons, right? But people tend to take the same approach again, again, again. So that's actually kind of negative side of this like a Zen approach, sometimes. But actually, in order to take but I'm not saying that the holistic and dialectic approach, in a way, and comparing that one as the analytical, logical, linear thinking. I'm not saying which is worse and which is better. We need to have both approach. So Japan's case, we need to have this analytical, logical, linear approach. So that's why I kind of try to bring a mindfulness approach to Japan. Especially try to preserve the tradition. So if they're new, I want to teach them more logically so the young people can understand, this is why we need to actually practice Buddhism or something like that. At least I need to make people have an interest in Buddhism. That's a kind of entrance. But for instance, this side here, on the other hand, the west side, in a way, because research part or but Buddhism was actually originally accepted as more adapted intellectually, right? Actually, for instance, probably if you ask about Buddhism to Japanese people, they have no idea. They think, okay, I think my grandma's house, we have a family altar, Buddhist style, so I think I'm Buddhist. But if you ask them, so what's actually main teaching of Buddhism? Or what do you need to do to be a Buddhist? People have no idea. But for instance, here, on the other hand, people actually learn Buddhism more academically first. So people can define what is Buddhism, what Buddhists shouldn't do, should do kind of thing. But lacking this embodiment part, right? So that's why in a way the people learning Buddhism but having a hard time to incorporate that one in their everyday life. That's what I feel sometimes when I actually teach workshop here or I actually give a lecture here. I mean, people actually, if I use some fancy Sanskrit, Pali word, people are not more here than in Japan. People like kind of like, what this guy talking about? Which language is that kind of way, right? But unfortunately, Japan also lost this embodiment part. But here we need now it's time to introduce embodiment part. Kind of how we actually live. It's not just about specific, part of life. Like, people talking about, I meditate because I want to reduce my stress, or I meditate because I want to be more productive or creative. It's not like that way. But how about as a being, as a human, how I can actually change my being, or how I can change actually perspective in a reality through this practice. Then but also this, not just about, oh, I practice this, meditation things, or I try to practice this tradition, like 5 years, I'm done. It's not like that way, you want to actually use this idea to kind of change your life, or actually notice about your change in your life more. Then kind of like lifetime kind of, probably you cannot find a right answer. That's a Buddhism in a way. It's not like you do this when you be saved. It's not like that, because they once again, they're not commandment. They actually give you, hey, this is my suggestion here. It's worked for me, but I don't know about you. So you need to think, right? That's the approach. You should find a Buddhist text. So you need to have a constant search for the meanings. But so because they don't give you this instruction, step-by-step approach, so you have to constantly change in the approach, right? The adjustment, you need that. So that's why actually you need to really kind of understand. So that's one of the reasons why I want to, tomorrow too, I want to test how your attention works. You probably do it a really different way than you ever done the meditation, but at that moment, kind of think about how you paid attention. What this guy doing? I'm not really good example of Buddhist practitioner in a way, but still kind of in a way that how this guy using, or how other people, like how, for instance, how he's actually using, not using, but how he lives. Pay attention to not about your professor, not just about academic part. His being. That's really kind of teach you more than in his classroom. So that doesn't mean you have to follow him all the time. I don't want to be his stalker, but but I think that's that's kind of part there. He have a probably more practice than me, and then so that's if you're and then probably you have more occasion to see him, unless you kind of come to Japan to stay in my temple. So kind of not just about what teacher says, even like you join some Zen center or Vipassana center or mindfulness programs. Look at teachers, how he lives, but in these days, unfortunately, you can see many mindfulness instructors and programs, organized by corporations or some interesting groups. People just focus in those, contexts, but you don't really look at teacher. How, as a being, as a human being, right? So that's why actually this approach here, this how this person live, learn from the lifestyle, not just about parts by parts. I mean, even like Aristotle said, sum is more than wholeness is more than sum of the parts, right? So please have this type of approach. So that's why I want to bring out this kind of old-fashioned Zen monastic approach to 21st century, but I want to combine it with Western approaches. So that's I want to bring it to the U.S. more and more, hopefully more into Europe as well, but also bringing different approaches to Japan, to people to realize that how this type of thing changed my life, and how keep teaching me in a different life stage. Not just about reading, this is a Buddhist text, this is the Buddhist book about Buddhism. It's about how people living, if he is studying the Buddhism, or even mindfulness, a contemplative study. That's I want to focus on that. So, but any questions? Did I talk long enough?
expressed one of the fundamental rationales we have for establishing contemplative studies and for including critical first-person contemplative practice as part of the concentration. As one of my elders once put it, we are not only trying to teach critical thinking skills, we're trying to give you a set of critical being skills that you can carry off through the rest of your lives.
Yeah.
So I have a question just from the last few moments that you were speaking. If it sounds as though your interest and your intent is to bring, as you said, the more analytic to Japan and to bring some of the maybe more openness of Rinzai here, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about like if that happened, yeah, and you're coming here a lot and you're bringing a lot over there, and what is your ideal of what will be coming of this project? What is your hope for an end point of some sort?
Outside that, I don't know. Outside that, I don't know. I'm just trying to find out what might be good, or change it. Maybe the bad outcome might be the wrong way. What I learned from this type of thing, actually, there's a funny story my friend told me because I tried to find the right way. Then my friend told me that this story. So this is, I think. So when the washing machine was invented, so when was it? Like 40s, 50s, 40s, right? So back then, okay, so it's not gender equality or anything. So right, so that's why inventor of a washing machine or those companies said, liberating women from the laundry duties. We made them happier. But actually, some of the group of female got really upset about invention of laundry machine. I mean, laundry machine. Anyone can guess why? Some of the group of female, they ruined this machine ruining my life. They're so furious. Do you know why? Anyone? So before the laundry machine was invented, how they wash their clothes? Hands, right? Where they go?
When they went together.
Yeah, they went together. They went to communal well or communal washing place. So they say that okay, laundry machine. Now we have to stay in the home more. In a way, no more gossiping time, no chit chat anymore. They took my free time. I don't want to, when I'm washing this, laundry. I'm doing the laundry. I don't want to. I didn't need to see my husband's face or other families, whatever. So they were furious. Then, for instance, then that's actually low-tech things, but low-tech automation part. But I'm involved in this stem cell research ethical things. For instance, this one of my friends doing the research at the Kyoto University. He's not kidding. He's cancer, but other friends. So he's doing this research about stem cell research. So now just take out one living cell. You can make 1,000 sperms and also 1,000 eggs, right? Well, he did it for people having difficulty getting pregnant. But then people start talking about, well, this one leads us to the eugenicistic idea because people start, of course, in the science, in a way, people don't randomly choose those eggs and sperm. They actually choose the best one. Then that's a eugenicist in a way. Then there's even book that they talk about, by 2050, we stop having sex to reproduce. Because in that way, actually, you can have a more ideal babies. But, first of all, that's a eugenicist. But also second part there, people start having, so it's kind of, designer's baby part, right? So designer's baby part, in a way that people start, it's going to be a trend for the babies. This generation, in a way, okay, people prefer this type of characters for their own kids. And next generation, they have, then maybe 10 years later, oh, that's old that's out of fashion right now. So now this trend is this one, right? Then, but scary part there is actually each generation, there's no much diversities. They first start looking similar. They start having similar characters genetically. So that's because we lose, basically we lose diversities, right? So in that case, is that a good thing or bad thing to actually develop in technology to, using stem cell to getting pregnant and getting babies, right? So, but in a way, always we end up in the conclusion, somebody's gonna do it anyway. But point here is actually you don't know, because I have no idea. I mean, I'm just doing it in a way. Maybe it works good, or maybe whatever we do. Actually, we end up, we always have issues anyway. So that's actually important part of this dialectic approach. We tend to make black and white decision, right? We say, oh, this is a good thing, or this is a bad thing. We tend to make such kind of judgment. But reality is we don't know. We say, oh, I'm doing good thing, but it's even like I think Max Weber said once. Max Weber say, good thing come out a good thing, and a bad thing come out a bad thing. That's an immature way of thinking. That he said that once. So in a way that I'm just doing it. Yeah, is that okay? Any questions?
I wanted to just make just a quick observation. It's something that I came from the Catholic tradition, the Christian tradition, and the parallels of what you said in terms of what's going on with the Christian church and certainly the Catholic church was just striking to me. As a matter of fact, it was almost painful because I'm watching, an institution that I love and kind of came up through, and I understand all the issues, but churches closing, young people completely disconnecting. So the parallel, I didn't think I was going to be coming here to hear that that's going on elsewhere. But I see the commonality, and I'm going to be thinking a lot about what is it? It's that disconnect from reality. It's the disconnect from the Pope even doing what he did over the last few weeks. Just disconnect, and that will bring death. So in a way, it's a good thing, but yet the parallels are so striking. Around the world, there's a huge change, revolution going on, and that's a good thing. So I just wanted to just give you the comment how deeply that resonated with a tradition that I love, that I'm watching die before my very eyes as well.
Thank you.
So
thank you,
for what it's worth.
Yeah. Anybody? Jason.
I like that by the end of the talk you came back to one of the first stories you began with, which was thinking about the difference between learning about something from one's grandmother and learning about it in some sort of logical way, like from a book. You return to this theme again at the end. So I guess I was wondering, there seems to be a tension then in sort of this, I can see you responding to these different needs and this desire to preserve the tradition but also change it. And so there's a tension between wanting to continue what's been done and to bring it out. And so I guess I wondered, how can you, if what you're doing is going into corporations and teaching them in logical ways, how do you give them a grandma experience?
That's a good point. Normally, like, if they hire me for a long time, it works. But if they invite me just one time talk, it's like end up just talking in logical part and then analytical assumption, whatever. That's it. Then, but corporation part. For instance, each company have a founder, right? So it's not about memorizing. The Japanese companies' case, they have a shakun, which is kind of company policy or vision. They actually read that, before. I mean, yeah. For the which company is that? Unilever, they have those. Well, every company in the U.S. They also have the serving for the community, something like that. They have those kind of thing. But if you're just memorizing those, it's kind of pointless, right? I always suggest people that learn about founders' life, how they lived. Your founder. I mean, I normally invited to the many startup business. So they're still alive. They're like 20 years old or something like that. Some of the youngest startups I know was 14 years. No, he was 17, and he invited me to give a talk for his much senior workers. And then I told people like 40 and look at this guy. He's 17, but look at how he lives and how he come up with those ideas. But it's not just about how he come up with the idea, but how he tried to use his skills to serve for the community. So just focus on how, paying attention to how he lived and his being. That's really helpful. So the Japanese companies, case normally I'm invited for those old traditional like big corporation too. So just think about how founder lived. Then it's not just about those books you see that or those more like first person things. I mean, for instance, a company all normally have their founders biography written by insider, but from the outsider point of view, but mostly focusing on the human side. It's not about what he did as a business wide, but more focused on the family side or private side. So I think Masaki he gonna come later this year, later program. I think Masaki Matsubara, he's a friend of mine too. He studied about Hakuin, Zen master, one of the Zen master in the Edo period. But Japan's case, unfortunately, we don't really focus on his life. It's more about what he did, his paintings or something like that. But also, my temple actually connected to D.T. Suzuki. D.T. Suzuki often came to my temple because between the 1930s and the early 40s, Shinichi Hisamatsu, he was another major Zen scholar around the time. He lived in my temple. D.T. Suzuki often came to my temple. Then people, normally think about, they discuss about Zen, future of Zen and West, how they can bring Zen to the, West, right? Then actually I met one scholar in the U.S. He studied about the, D.T.'s private diary. And then I found out reason why D.T. Suzuki often came to my temple was Beatrix, his wife, was a horrible cook. Because she just boiled, her cooking was edamame and boiled potato. So that's why DT, then Shinichi Hisamatsu, on the other hand, he was single, but also he actually lived in my temple, but he actually ordered every meal from local restaurant. So that's why DT often came to my temple. So that was not like any, of course they talk about Zen and the philosophy and all kind of things too, but major reason why he came for the food, right? But that kind of thing in Japanese scholars, they don't do that. They just focus on how great he was. He brought Zen to the West. He's a great scholar. I mean, but I think that's what's really interesting to me. I mean, really interesting to me because that was, well, he's a human. He didn't want to eat good bad food. I mean, something like that. But I think those kind of part, really help us to understand. That he's still human. Then, but he actually came up with a great idea. How he did it. How he lived it. So that's why actually. I normally, tell people like that, don't just focus on those achievement. I mean, just, more like a regular site. So, that's, how I teach about the grammar side, I think, to the corporation. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah.
Does your integration of mindfulness into the Zen practice
Mhm.
indicate that you feel that the secular nature of the mindfulness practices compensates for the dissolution of formal religion?
Not really, because Zen, well, Buddhism originally didn't have any higher being or anything.
Say that again.
The Buddhism originally didn't have any deities or anything. It's more secular in a way, some level. I kind of consider I kind of consider myself like a Buddhist atheist. Just, and then any philosophical tradition kind of defining how we define the self or something like that. So I think that the mindfulness approach really interested me because in a way it's more like a finding about own self, focus on the self, right? But Buddhism case actually no self. So there's a contradiction, but in order to understand no self, maybe finding that self is important. So that's why I don't see any contradiction in a way.
But Taka, I think Empo was there's an underlying observation that there seems to have been a decline in organized religion,
Okay.
and that
Sorry.
one way to make contemplative practice more interesting to people who don't follow a lot of organized religion is through this kind of more logical, step-by-step, scientifically validated form of mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's kind of show that many certified mindfulness instructors in Japan in these days. It's certified by corporations, and also some instructor they had a 1 week of a meditation experience or something like that. That's kind of a little bit scary part I see. So that's why I kind of, openly criticize people like that sometimes, because I'm not really personally criticizing, but actually criticizing the trend. Then, well, I say it's good that everybody started having interest in meditation, but at the same time, just it's not about you do this one for the relaxation, you do this one for the productivity. Yeah, there's actually some sort of damage going on, but sometimes people go, of course, but we need to have two different approaches, wide approach and deep approach. Then actually wide approach is important because, in a way, if we do just deep approach only, we can approach the only smaller population. Then wide approach, in a way, help to, outreach to more population. Then, which is a good thing. Then among them, people started having interest in deep approach. I think that's a good thing. So even like Japan right now, at this moment, only the wide approach is accepted. But slowly, people started having interest in deeper approach too. So I think that's a good thing. So, well, in a way, we losing some members, but we're losing kind of authority-like states as authorities like more like expertise. I mean, people don't see they don't see Zen priests as the only expert of meditation. Actually, there's a bunch of mindfulness instructors right now. They're more considered the authority in a way, but I think that's part of the passage. I think it's fine with me. Is that your answer? Is that a quick question? Is that kind of not really?
I resonate with how Hal interpreted my concern and question. I couldn't always follow you, but I do appreciate your generous response. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.